There's dog hair everywhere. Everywhere. Dog hair. I love tea, but I have a very bad habit of like drinking it hours after it's been brewed. So for today's video, I'm going to do a little book haul, another one, and I'm going to talk about the 6 books I read in September. As well as at the end, if I don't forget this time, I've already filmed this video like 4 or 5 times, I'm going to talk about some like future plans, if you will. So to start out with, the first book that I read was an audiobook for a book club that I'm a part of, and it is Nuclear Family by Joseph Hahn. As I mentioned previously, I think star ratings are like a really weird way to go, but if I had to pick, this to me would be the archetypal 3-star book. I found with this, I read it via audiobook, which to me normally I don't have a preference one way or another. I choose for nonfiction, I do prefer audiobook because I can like listen to it while walking around and doing chores, kind of like a podcast. But for fiction, it's really kind of here or there, just kind of more or less depending on if I want to have a physical copy in my collection. For this book, I actually really think I would have enjoyed it more had I read it physically. One part of this book that I didn't necessarily realize coming into it is that it's not like, what's it called? Realistic fiction. Like there's some supernatural elements at play, which I did enjoy. I thought, but was a very big plus for me in the book. The book itself is about a Korean American family who has a restaurant in Hawaii, I forget which island, and it is, the back of the book describes it, or like the synopsis or summary, whatever it's called, describes it as like events leading up to the false nuclear warning that happened. But I would say that that is not, that's sort of a misrepresentation. The story is really about how the son, the oldest child, he tries to run to North Korea through the like touristy DMZ part, and he stops, and it's very embarrassing for the family, and they have to deal with the social repercussions of this while also, you know, struggling to kind of make it in America with their family-run business. The book touches on cultural expectations, immigration, family ties, feeling the division of the South and the North. Okay, so I completely forgot to mention a really big theme in the book is that one of the characters is gay, and there's a lot of discussion about, you know, the like hiding that from your family and the like just the pressures that can exist when you are gay and you're living in a more or traditional family. Yeah, that's also a really big part of the book. And I think it does a good job of balancing these things together. The part that really I did not appreciate about this book was just I did not really like the daughter's parts. Like I found her, I don't want to say annoying, but a lot of what she deals with is her, I would call it like a dependency on weed, and it was just to me a very boring element of this character that kept being brought up over and over and over again. And I did think that the book kind of suffered from heavily focusing on that. I mean, I understand that that's really relatable for a lot of people. It's just, for me, it was a little redundant after like the 13th time. We get it. She's a pothead. Super fun. Okay, so after that, I read A Death on Gokumon Island by Seishi Yokomizo. This is like the 4th one in the Pushkin Vertigo, I don't know what you call it, like revitalization. I enjoy all the other books. I like this one too. I really especially enjoy the connection to World War II and how it's very clear that these characters are recovering, and I just thought it was like a really cool, interesting element to bring into this mystery novel, and learning about that and how these people are coming back to their country, some of the sacrifices they had to make. yeah, there's like not much you can say. I feel like apart from that, I know that some people said that this was, some people, I saw a review where someone was like, oh, it took a while to get started. To me, I feel like the writing isn't so dramatic, that it takes a long time to read. I feel like you're finished just over the course of 3 days pretty quickly. And I mean, for me, that's pretty quick. And I felt that, like, I don't know, I thought it was interesting enough, and I think there was enough about the war so that the parts that weren't action-filled mystery novel were like still interesting. Even if it wasn't the kind of point of a detective novel, I was still enjoying myself. I need to stop doing air quotes at everything. I'm getting annoyed with myself. Yeah, so if you have liked those books, and I feel like if you like kind of lightweight 20th century mystery, it's a good option. After that, I read, and I actually, the first book I have a physical copy of, I read 10 Loves of Nishino by Hiromi Kawakami. She also authored Strange Weather in Tokyo. I could not stand, and I can stand this. I feel like this is also a good, like, three-star read. Because I could not stand the guy that is at the center of this novel. The idea is it's this main character who's not really the main character, except he is, but it's 10 short stories about people who've fallen in love with this guy at different points in his life, from his older years to when he was, you know, in middle school to college, whatever. I feel like I couldn't like this because I just don't really like love stories very much, and this obviously was a lot about, like, people falling in love. So kind of obvious I wasn't gonna like it. What I did like about this, though, was that even though these characters were allegedly in love, the women never felt as though they were enamored with this man. It was always, you know, they kind of were the ones who wanted to leave. They were the ones who realized the relationship needed to end. So even though there was this romantic, all these women who loved this man, it felt like the women were more in control than he was, and he was kind of just participating lightly. I also appreciated that the women felt really strong in comparison to him. Like, he felt kind of like a soft boy, and I found him very annoying, which is kind of why I didn't like the book, because I didn't find him a particularly interesting subject matter. So seeing him described 10 times, like, after the third time, I was like, okay, I already know I don't like him, but I want to finish the book, so I have to keep reading. After that, I read what has become now one of my favorite books of this year, and that is Almond by Won-Pyung. And this, I think, is absolutely beautiful, and everyone should read this. This, like, my heart was fluttering. Such a good book. I'll actually read the synopsis. Young Jae was born with a brain condition called alexithymia that makes it hard for him to feel emotions like fear or anger. So I actually looked up alexithymia, and normally it's kind of closely connected to ASD, but from what I understand in the book, apparently can also, if you have small amygdala, you can also have this. And it's not so much that you don't feel your emotions, but it's like you don't know what you're feeling. So you are technically feeling happy, it's just you don't necessarily know you're happy. You have to, like, use context clues to figure out that you're happy. I think I could be very ignorant. He does not have friends, but his devoted mother and grandmother provide him with a safe and contented life. But everything changes when a shocking act of random violence shatters his world, leaving him alone and on his own. Struggling to cope with his loss, Yoon-jae retreats into silent isolation until a troubled teenager, Gong, arrives at school. The two form a surprising bond, and when Gong suddenly finds his life at risk, Yoon-jae will have to step outside of every comfort zone he has created to perhaps become the hero of his own story. That is one of the best, I feel like, summaries of a book that I've seen, or like teasers of a book I've seen. Like, it describes parts of the events of the book without giving too much away and without inaccurately saying anything. Like, I found this book so beautifully written. I also like that you were dealing with teenagers, but it wasn't infantilizing. I felt like those teenagers, they weren't patronized. They were treated like people with thoughts and feelings and places where they could grow. I appreciated that we saw this juxtaposition of two characters, one character who has difficulty understanding his own emotions and relaying them and feeling them in a way, I suppose. We had that character, but we also saw that that character was loved, and you know, his family cared so deeply about him, his mother and his grandmother. And then we have this other character, Gong, who he is very emotional. He cares deeply, and he tries so hard not to because he thinks that that's what makes someone strong. And his difficulty in that he didn't have the loving loving parents around in his life. And just seeing the way that the two characters interacted with each other, their friendship and how their friendship formed, I thought this was beautifully written, and I was just so in love. And I feel like, you know, maybe there are parts of the story that are problematic, given that it is talking about this condition and in a way potentially, you know, inaccurately talking about it. But my God, I think it's so beautiful. And I also appreciate that the author, she even sort of alludes to the fact that this character's neurodivergence, in some way, it's romanticized by the world. Oh, if I was like that, if the way we kind of sometimes romanticize people who have disabilities as being these like, oh, they're like superpowers, they have these other thing that makes them super special, or they're able to, you know, do all these cool things. I like how the book sort of shows Gong's character kind of romanticizing the fact that our main character can't feel anything, but the main character being like, that's not really anything. Like, I'm not special. Like, I'm different, but I'm not like special or like a super person, you know? And I thought that was handled, I think, in a good way. I also I watched a review of this, and someone was talking about, like, there's a girl who's introduced, and on one hand I can see why it's like she kind of didn't feel like a very well developed character, but I thought that it was a good place to put for a book about a teenage boy to have a kind of romantic / sexual interest. Like, that feels very realistic for a teenage boy. And while she may have not been the most like well-rounded character, I didn't think that she took away from the novel, and I did think that she added something that was unexpected but not cringy and awkward. That is now definitely one of my favorite books of the year. Okay, after that, I finished a nonfiction book that I had been working on for so long, and that is The Half That Has Never Been Told: Slavery and the Making of American Capitalism by Edward E. Baptiste. So I originally got this book because it was on Rachel Cargill's kind of like one of her reading lists, and I thought it was going to be kind of a cool background story telling you a lot about slavery and giving it just kind of a nice background overview. I do feel like it did that, but it was such a dense book that I don't know, I feel like I forgot so much of it, and it was really hard to go all the way through it compared to some other nonfiction books that I've listened to. I do feel like I have now some good information about myths concerning American slavery and the Civil War. A few of the big standout things to me, I know that in the US there's this sort of belief that slavery would have ended anyway because slavery is an ineffective form of labor. Well, I think many of us understand that the reason slavery shouldn't end is because it's not a good form of labor. Like, it's the human rights, the terrible thing in the human rights violation that make it bad and why we should end it. I do think the book does a good example of showing how that is used as a way to almost, I don't know, obfuscate, is that the right word? Like, obfuscate responsibility for the South, and that, like, oh, this would have ended eventually. We didn't need the war to do this. This was, you know, this was an unnecessary thing because, like, America, we would have ended slavery at some point. And the truth is that that wouldn't have been the case without some kind of violent intervention. There were plans to continue slavery, and there were desires and wants to continue slavery. And there's actually a lot of evidence to show that slavery was a very effective form of labor. By the higher yields that were able to be produced year after year, they found kind of more torturous ways of getting labor out of people. And also they showed that there were actually kind of small, kind of experiments done where they like had land and freed slaves, and they said, we'll pay you if you work on this land. And they weren't treating these people great either. And it certainly wasn't like freedom, but it was the North trying to show, oh, see, like if you treat people fairly and you don't enslave them, you can still get like a good results. And it showed, no, that's not the case. I also like the inclusion of, oh, well, this was the Civil War is about states' rights. I do think that Baptiste does a good job of saying, not really. I mean, if it was so much about states' rights, why were slave-owning Southern white people trying to convince non-slave-owning Southern white people, like, hey, if you don't side with us, all these abolitionists are trying to give Black people rights and citizenship, and they're trying to give them like they could marry your daughters and stuff. So there was a lot of race-based discussion happening that showed that, you know, they were afraid of white people gaining, of Black people gaining rights. And no, this was not just purely states' rights. Race had a very integral part. I think a lot of young people now are going to grow up with that knowledge, but I do think when I was growing up, there was, you know, you would not infrequently hear those arguments. And so to now have more knowledge and to feel comfortable and feel like I have responses to those conversations, I think that's one of the reasons why I like reading books like this. I feel more informed to engage in those discussions. Yeah. So while I can't say like I loved the book itself, I do think I learned a good amount. I just wish it was more succinct, and then I feel like I would have learned more. That's a me problem though, I sent it. The last book that I read last month actually, was Haruki Murakami's After the Quake. This is actually kind of similar to 10 Loves of Nishino in that there is a central thing and then stories surrounding it. In this case, the central event is the 95 earthquake in Kobe, and there are 6 stories that sort of, they don't focus really on Kobe at all. It's just people after, like directly after the earthquake and things that they're going through. I really like, if you like Murakami, I do think this is something you're going to like. It's quite short, and I think the stories do flow nicely. I will say the second half, so the last 3 stories, are, in my opinion, far superior than the first 3, but the second one wasn't too bad. Yeah, if you like him, you like him. If you don't like him, you're not gonna like it. It's sort of standard Murakami stuff. You have some supernatural elements / magical realism elements. You have some misogyny. You have some weird sexual stuff. It's a classic book of his. Okay, so quickly then I want to go on to my book haul, because of course I'll just go in the order that they're stacked in. So I got this one my last finished book, I got that a few days ago at Barnes & Noble's, and I also got In the Miso Soup by the other Murakami, Ryu Murakami. I got this for a October creepy buddy read with a friend. The same one I did the Colleen Hoover book, so very much fingers crossed that this is better, because I did not like that book. The other book, these are also, the next 3 are from Barnes & Noble's, but I ordered these online, which I very rarely ever do, so interesting point to make, I guess. Not really. This I got because I saw Tokyo Chemist. She recently read another Krakauer book, and I know she's read this one and really enjoyed it. I am fascinated by the 96 Everest disaster, so I wanted to pick this up and see what it's about, especially because a lot of the other coverage focuses so much on Beck Weathers. I wanted to know, like, what does Krakauer have to say about this? And I am currently reading this. I think I'm into chapter 7 at the moment. Yeah, so a little less than 100 pages in. Next up, I have Earthlings by Sayaka Murata, the author of The Convenience Store Woman. It's about a young girl who feels kind of like out of place in her family, and I know there's some like weird event that happens, and sort of she's like trying to test out if she's an alien. I think that's what this book is about. I feel like the being different, being out of place, I'm curious to see how Murata handles this subject as opposed to like the very distinguished character in Convenience Store Woman. So I'm excited. Another Japanese, big Japanese female author, Mieko Kawakami, All the Lovers in the Night. I don't actually know anything about this at all. I've been seeing so many of those interviews of hers that have to deal with this book, so I wanted to get it just so I can like finish it and watch those interviews finally. Quite short, I feel, and then I really wanted the hardcover copy. I normally actually don't prefer hardcover copies and like almost never get them, but in this case my other 2 books by her are hardcover, and I was like, you know what, if I'm going, I'm willing to invest for her to have like matching sets. And the last 4 are books that I acquired when I was still in California. The first 2 I borrowed from my aunt, and this is Orphan Essays, Charles D'Ambrosio. And I just think, doesn't this look like such an aesthetic, like those aesthetic book talk girls? They're probably like a little French, you know, and they have like No Longer Human and The Bell Jar and that one Dark Academia book by Donna Tartt, you know, like those girls. This is the kind of book that they would like aesthetically. I'm not one of those people. I don't have the eye for that stuff. But this book is a collection of essays based on buildings that the author has been to. So there's a haunted house, there's an orphanage, there's some of these manufactured homes, and I thought that was such an interesting subject matter, so I really wanted to pick this up. Next up is definitely just someone's dissertation turned into a hardcover book, and it is Violence and the Pornographic Imagery, the Politics of Sex, Gender, and Aggression in Hardcore Pornography by Natalie Purcell. This is another subject that I've seen a lot of documentaries about, and since most of those rely on sort of the industry professionals and more, I don't want to say anecdotal, but yeah, anecdotal experiences about working in that business, I wanted to see what a more academic, maybe data statistics based approach to that would be, and kind of pair my knowledge of the anecdotes with some potential, you know, potential data. So I don't know, very excited. I'm gonna feel like I'm right back in school again. And the last 2 to me also have a similar theme. The first is The Secret World of Weather, How to Read Signs in Every Cloud, Breeze, Hill, Street, Plant, Animal, and Dewdrop by Tristian Gooley. I'm curious to see if this can truly be read like a book or if it's more like a reference situation, but I'm also interested to see, is this going to explain to you the science of what's going on, or is it going to be kind of more predictive? So if you see these types of clouds in the morning, this is the weather you can expect in the afternoon. I don't know, and I'm kind of excited to find out. The last one, also kind of the more of a reference book, is Baba Yaga's Book of Witchcraft, Slavic Magic from the Witch of the Woods by Madame Pamita. I find different like tarot or witchcraft esoteric things, I find them really interesting. As a person who's lived in cities for the last few years or in suburban developments my whole life, I do think that sometimes I can really distance myself from like internal connection and reflexivity and nature, and I find that things like this can allow me to take pause and reconnect and provide some ritual around that. So that's why I like exploring these types of things. I feel like they are very fun to create habits around, you know. And with that, I am Slavic, so to have something like this as opposed to feeling inappropriate and appropriating, you know, maybe a culture that isn't mine, I at the very least am Slavic and can do that and not feel bad. But yeah, also she is a Ukrainian diaspora witch, which I always love to support Ukrainian authors. Awesome. So yeah, those are the books I read in September and a quick little book haul. I am moving, so this has been kind of a wild summer into fall. In August, my lease was up, so I got my stuff out of my apartment, stayed with my grandma in the city I was in, and then I flew to California to spend time with other family, and now I'm back on the East Coast with my parents, and then I'm going back up to the city that I was in with my original grandma, and then I'm moving up to the city that I'm going to actually be living in. So it's going to be a lot, and it has been a lot of kind of moving and shuffling around. But when I get to this new place, I really don't want to spend too much of my money on books right away. I have so many that I haven't read yet, notwithstanding the books that I have purchased in California and here. So I really do want to focus on getting through my collection, and I think I'm going to do that by sort of doing a no buy for books from, you know, from now basically until 6 months into 2023. And I've done this before with other things. I feel like it's a good way to just remind yourself, use up what you have. You don't need to get new stuff. There are going to be some exceptions to this personally. Like for my book club, it's not fair for me to tell people like I'm only going to read things that I already own. And for those books, I often do to listen for audiobooks. So at the very least there, I'm not going to have like a lot of bulky books. And then I do have like a buddy read with my friend that I'm doing, and we're trying to do one I think every season. And so, you know, with that, I also feel like it wouldn't be very fair to say like, no, we have to read books I already have. So I might buy a few more, but definitely not at the rate that I was purchasing beforehand. And I don't know, I'm pretty excited to work through a lot of the books that I own. So there was some commotion downstairs. But yeah, so that's been just the books that, like I said, the books that I read, the books that I bought, and some future plans for book buying. I'm excited to see you in my next video. Thank you so much.